We are in the process of exploring the foundations of Christian meditation. And so far, we are exploring how our faith in Christ is our foundation in Christian meditation. Sitting, gazing into Christ's eyes as Christ gazes into ours. Our faith in Christ draws us into an ever deeper realization of our oneness with Christ. This Spirit-led realization is one in which our experience of ourselves as other than Christ, and of Christ as other than us, begins to dissolve and give way to a realized oneness with Christ. The awakening of the mind of Christ within us refers then to the awakening of this unity, in which we begin to see ourselves through Christ's eyes, where we begin to realize who Christ eternally realizes us to be. And in awakening to ourself as seen through Christ's eyes, we begin to look out at others through Christ's eyes. We begin to look out at the world through Christ's eyes. We begin to see the God-given, godly nature of ourselves and of others and of everything around us. Awakening to the mind of Christ is then a Christian metaphor, a Christian way of expressing a most profound and ineffable experience of awakening to this unity, in which we begin to see ourselves through Christ's eyes, where we begin to realize who Christ sees in Christ's eternal vision of us. And seeing ourselves through Christ's eyes, we begin to look out at others through Christ's eyes. We begin to look out at the world through Christ's eyes. We begin to see the God-given, godly nature of ourselves, the God-given, godly nature of others, and of everything around us. So faith in Christ gravitates towards this realization of meditative, contemplative experience of oneness with Christ. This very same process can also be explored in the language of experience. That is, instead of speaking in terms of Christian faith, we can speak in terms of experience itself, realizing here that we're relying on words in the face of that in which words prove to be inadequate. That is, we can only approximate in words what the words are alluding to, so that as we listen to these words, we might recognize within our own heart that which is being spoken of. Specific focus here is that of gazing into Christ's eyes as Christ gazes into ours. In gazing into Christ's eyes as Christ gazing into ours, I have in mind here a very simple, concrete, down-to-earth event that is continuous with this way of life. That is, in the midst of the day, one pauses, grounds oneself in a silent, loving attentiveness to Christ. One gazes into Christ's eyes, gazing into ours. In faith, we say that Christ is perpetually gazing into our eyes. That is, Christ's gaze is eternally fixed upon us. As a matter of fact, we would say in Christian faith that even before we were born, God the Father eternally beholds himself in Christ the Word, and eternally beholding himself in Christ the Word, eternally beholds us, one with himself in Christ the Word, forever. God eternally knows who we eternally are in him and as him before we were born. And eternally knowing who we eternally are in his eternal knowledge of himself, he utters to us his fiat, his creation, and bringing into existence whom he eternally knows. And bringing into existence whom God eternally knows, he brings us into existence in a freedom. A freedom to what? A freedom to become who we eternally are, in him, in whom is hidden the source, the foundation, and the fulfillment of our life. And so this moment of pausing to gaze into the eyes of Christ is a moment of pausing to gaze into our eternal destiny. It is pausing to gaze into our eternal identity. It is pausing to gaze into the abyss-like foundations of reality itself. This gazing into the eyes of Christ might be understood literally as sitting in silent prayer before an icon or before an image of Christ. It might be more an interior sense of the presence of Christ that one has to the reading of the Gospels, a lifelong commitment to seeking Christ. And one sits in a very childlike, sincere way and gazes into Christ's eyes, eternally gazing into ours. It is interesting how, between two people, how difficult it is to maintain a silent, mutual gazing into each other's eyes. The intensity of the intimacy is too much to bear for very long. Two people talking with each other will look at each other, then they look away, then they look at each other, and then they look away. But the sustained, silent, deep, uninterrupted, mutual gazing is not sustained for very long. Yet how true it is that lovers delight in gazing wordlessly into one another's eyes. How so? Because in the gazing, the mutual awareness of being other than each other yields to a mutual awareness of being one with each other. This transition from a mutual awareness of otherness to a mutual awareness of oneness is, we might say in the context of our reflection, a mutual meditation in which each yields to interior spiritual dimensions of a meditative, contemplative experience of their oneness with one another in the love they share. It is in this childlike sincerity, this guileless openness, this vulnerable attentiveness, that Christian meditation awakens, deepens, and grows. This sense of gazing into Christ's eyes as Christ gazes into ours gives rise to a theme that one finds in Christian spirituality of knowledge by connaturality. Knowledge by connaturality is the knowledge that's attained by virtue of being what one knows. Love is like this. Art is like this. All fidelity to the deep things of life that transform our hearts bring us to this knowledge of connaturality. And our faith in Christ is like this. It passes beyond believing in, passes beyond devotional love into a vulnerable, transforming experience in which our understanding of ourselves as other than Christ yields and gives way to a realization of oneness with Christ. And here, this gazing gives rise to the Christian understanding of the mind of Christ and to Christian meditation as a way of awakening to the mind of Christ within us. There is a passage in Paul's letter to the Philippians that helps us to go more deeply into this reflection on gazing into Christ's eyes as Christ gazes into ours. That is, to knowing Christ through a oneness with Christ, in which St. Paul speaks of awakening to the mind of Christ within us. St. Paul writes, "Let the mind that was in Christ Jesus to also be in you." So what is this mind of Christ? That is, if we turn now to meditate together on this rich image of the mind of Christ, what does it reveal to us about ourselves and about meditation practice and about the self-transforming journey we are exploring here together? One dimension of the mind of Christ is certainly the mind of Christ is realizing a oneness with God. Jesus says in the Gospel according to John that he who beholds me beholds the one who sent me. And in the Gospel of John, the disciple Philip asked Jesus, "Show us the Father and it'll be enough." And Jesus responds that he who sees me sees the Father. That is, in the Easter faith realization of who the Christian community realized Jesus to be, John puts upon the lips of Jesus this revelation of himself as the one in whom the presence of God is recognized. That Jesus realized himself to be eternally and perfectly one with God. That the mind of Christ is the mind that realizes non-dual consciousness with God, such that all God is manifested in and as all that we are, and all that we truly are and are called to be is all that God is revealed to be. This is very difficult, impossible in fact, for the ego mind to grasp conceptually. It is the realization of this union that St. John of the Cross speaks of as mystical marriage, that St. Teresa of Avila speaks of as that which is realized in the seventh most interior mansion of the soul, which Meister Eckhart speaks of as breakthrough into the Godhead. It is a realization of a unitive mystery in which even now God is all in all that we really are. That our presence in the world is the presence of God made manifest.